Great. So, hi everybody. I'm Susannah Ellis, and I want to tell you a little bit about my path through all things Agile. So my Agile journey started here. I didn't know it then, but looking back, I can place it exactly. Once upon a time, way back in 2006, I'd been working in a little startup since I'd graduated, and we dreamed of the day when we'd have many, many customers, but right then we were definitely in build it and they will come mode. One day, the CEO was in an unusually fractious mood. He'd heard me talking to his co-founder about the latest release that we'd been working on, and he was beyond frustrated at the lack of urgency and the ever-lengthening estimates around when this release would get out of the door. He started to vent his frustration, and my response, I'm ashamed to admit, was the words above. If nobody's asking for our new product, why does it actually matter how long it takes us to get it to them, or how long we spend perfecting it first? At the time, it seemed a perfectly reasonable question to me, but the CEO knew that it wasn't okay. In fact, it was far from okay. He didn't mention feedback and small iterations and empiricism and test and learn like we've just heard about. But instinctively, he just knew that taking too long to build an enormous release without getting any feedback was a massive mistake. My Agile knowledge was at 0%. Now, maybe if my boss back in 2006 had been familiar with the Agile Manifesto, he might have answered my why does it matter question with one of the manifesto's values. Because we were really busy negotiating contracts with customers, but how could we build a great product for them without their collaboration and their feedback? Or maybe he'd have even reached for the first principle. Early and continuous delivery was the complete opposite of where we were right then. Luckily for me, he didn't do either of those things, but our conversation did lead him to start looking for solutions to his problem of inertia. Enter Prince 2. No, not that one, sadly. Prince 2, the project management methodology even, along with some really lovely project managers who knew just how to use it. So now we had a project plan and some documentation, a lot of documentation and change requests and go, no-go decisions and races and CAB meetings. So did we release software faster and more frequently now? Well, put it this way, there's a reason that the Agile Manifesto says working software over comprehensive documentation. Enter Scrum. Now, one day, our project manager came into work and she said that over the weekend, she'd heard about this Agile framework known as Scrum, and it sounded like it could be the answer to all our problems. Now, we'd have 2-week iterations, not 6 months worth of documented requirements. We'd have a Scrum Master, a product owner, and a development team, and a backlog, sprint planning, sprint reviews, and sprint retrospectives. Overnight, I was made the interim product owner, just until they found someone who actually knew what they were doing, and my weapon of choice became Google. As an aside, we did have one developer in the team who'd used Scrum before, and I did go on to marry him, but I don't think it was just because of his knowledge of Agile frameworks. So, was it an overnight success? No, but so began my curiosity about an approach that just sounded better. Agile knowledge, 1%. So by now, I'd had a number of different roles, from sales to account management, customer services, and marketing, and I felt that the only one that really got to the guts of customer problems was being a product owner. I'd moved on from the startup by now, and having been made redundant in my job as an online community manager, I took the plunge. My husband and I moved to London, and I started to read everything I could get my hands on about product management. I became a certified Scrum product owner, and I began the process of persuading businesses to let me try my hand at being a product owner, something that always seems to require 3 years of experience. I can still remember the room from my interview as a product owner, those bar stools that made my interview shoe and dress combo decidedly awkward. I also remember the lovely interviewers and 2 of the questions that they asked me. Why had I taken a qualification to become a product owner, and what was my favourite product? So I explained a bit to them about how I wanted to learn what the rules were before I went about breaking them. And also I talked about the fantastic product City Mapper. If you haven't used it, it's an absolute godsend. So as someone who just moved to London and had no idea how to get around and how to use public transport, that get me home button is just a feature of pure genius. I loved it. Anyway, it was clear that what they wanted was someone who had a hunger to learn and a real passion for amazing customer experiences. And on my 31st birthday, they rang me. I'd got the job. I was now the product owner for the flagship product for a multi-million-pound price comparison website. Eesh. So all I had to do was be a product owner. The learning curve was vertical, but wow, what a foundation, what a team. I'd got a truly autonomous cross-functional team. I'd got developers, UX, data and content experts all sitting around the same table. And the team had a really data-first approach and a truly collaborative way of solving problems. Nobody in the team had much experience of user testing, as it turned out, but we knew that we had to do it. So between us, we figured it out. Thank you to Marco D'Amelia for the inspired addition of mince pie user testing to our feedback gathering arsenal. There could be no better place to learn that individuals and interactions mean so much more than processes and tools, and that you've got to talk to your team and to your business, but most of all, you've got to talk to your customers. Agile knowledge, 30%. So over the next few years, I moved through a few more product management roles, learning as I went. Now, I'm lucky that I love to read and I love it when I'm learning, but I also learned a huge amount from the teams that I worked with. And funnily enough, this feels like one of those roles where actually you can really benefit from changing jobs frequently. They taught me about different tools, different approaches, new challenges, new frustrations, and it all started my fascination with team psychology and motivation theory. Now, while I was working at Booking.com, my team was lucky enough to be given an Agile coach, the fantastic Mr. Adam Dadswell. He was brilliant, and I saw the impact he had on our team. He just gently nudged us in the right direction, subtly leading by example and helping us to find the best path forward for ourselves. I also met Kaz Farrell. She was the lead Agile coach at Booking.com at the time, and she's just a true inspiration for any woman in tech. And at about the same sort of time, I started reading a book called Drive by Dan Pink. And in it, he describes how to be truly motivated, everybody needs to have autonomy, the opportunity to develop mastery, and a real sense of purpose. Now I've got my heart set on a new career that could help me to achieve all three. Agile coach, Agile knowledge, 60%. Now, I loved working with my first team as an Agile coach. They were unbelievably patient with me. I got to experiment on a real bunch of live humans, and I got to see how small changes, like helping the team to really focus on the work that delivered the most value, it made a real difference. And it wasn't just on their ability to deliver, it was also on how they felt about their work, how motivated they felt. I got a huge amount of satisfaction from seeing both individuals and the team as a whole really begin to thrive from the changes that we made together. The hardest part about your first team as a coach is that they know you're experimenting on them. And for me in particular, I'd also been a product owner within the same business, and that made me very cautious about treading on the toes of the product owners and the teams that I was coaching as an Agile coach. And in hindsight, I think, to be honest, I could have supported them a bit better because I was so nervous about stepping on their toes that I wasn't getting in there where I should have done. But I also joined a team where it was clear that I just wasn't needed. They'd got this. They knew what they were doing, and I had to realise that the best thing I could possibly do for them was to let them get on with it and get out of their way. Along the way, this book became my absolute Bible, and I can't recommend it highly enough to anybody who's an Agile coach in Scrum Mastery or just wants to read a bit more about how this whole thing works. It's still a book that I go back to when I have a particularly gnarly problem in the team. So I learned a huge amount while I was coaching teams, but not least about product management, strangely enough. So one thing that's tricky as a product owner is you're usually, unless something's gone slightly strange in your implementation of Scrum, you're usually the only product owner in the team. And that makes it really hard to know what good looks like. There's only you, and you don't have a great deal of interaction with others, so it's hard to have a benchmark. As an Agile coach, it's crystal clear. You can suddenly see how critical this role is to the team and how easily that role can make or break the team. I also learned the importance of so many of the values that run through the Agile frameworks. There's the need for great communication, obviously for focus, and courage and respect, perhaps slightly unexpected ones, but definitely there's a need for those in a team that's going to work well together. And also the impact of autonomy, what really happens when a team has got the autonomy to make its own decisions and choose its own path. I also learned some tips and tricks along the way about coaching a team. So how finding just one champion within the team can make the difference between success and failure, especially once you move on to coach another team and somebody has to pick up the pieces with the team you've left behind. I learned the hard way that a coach can easily become the team's agony aunt if you let them, and how important it is to equip that team with the tools and space they need to be able to help themselves, particularly when it comes to resolving conflict. I think one of my favourite tips would be to let the team's metrics do the talking. So I often started working with a new team by printing out their metrics out of Jira if they were using that, sticking them up on the wall with no notes at all, and just getting the team to have a look, talk about them and tell us what they saw. Because it's really hard to deny that there are issues in the team if the data is screaming at you that they exist. So by this stage, I'm feeling pretty confident. I've been a product owner, I've been an Agile coach, I have definitely got this. So I felt it was time to test my skills and to jump out into the world of contracting. And so began Cairn to Cairn Limited. Agile Knowledge, 90%. Now, as Tolstoy would tell us, happy families are all alike, and every unhappy family is unhappy in its own way. Well, I think I discovered that in spades as soon as I jumped out to start doing my own thing. So I came to realize that every business, while not necessarily unhappy, but every business, every team has its own challenges. And there are likely to be challenges because, let's face it, you don't tend to call in consultants if there aren't any. So I quickly came to see that Agile Knowledge doesn't solve every problem. In fact, it can be really frustrating if you know that there's a right way of doing something, or at least in your own mind, a right way, but you've got no authority to implement it. But what Agile Techniques can do is give you this amazing toolkit that allows you to pick the right weapon for battle, to choose what's going to work for the particular situation that you're in. It gives you a great foundation to give you confidence in your own approach. One challenge I did face was learning which hat to wear. Now, clients obviously hire consultants for their expertise in a particular area. And in my case, it was two specific areas, so product management and Agile coaching. The only trouble is, in a Scrum team, those hats are often worn by the product owner and the Scrum Master. And Scrum has made these two roles quite deliberately because there needs to be healthy tension between the two. Wearing both hats at the same time is a bit like being asked to be both a race circuit safety marshal and a racing driver. Your priorities are just going to conflict. You want to see the best product developed for your customer as quickly as you can possibly get it out there, but you also see that the team is challenged and broken and needs help, and you want to fix their processes and help them to deliver in a more sustainable way. The two things can be a real challenge side by side, and I've had to learn, and still learning, to remember what it is that I was hired to do, and to know that sometimes you've got to take a step back and pick your battles, know which things that you're going to go after. So here we are in 2020, that weirdest of weird years. So I've now been running my company for over a year now. I've had several contracts and they're all completely different. So I joined a new office in an industry I knew absolutely nothing about. I've taught a Scrum Master in the Philippines using only online lessons. And then only yesterday, I joined another business remotely where everybody I work with is a 2D Zoom image. So thank you to the wonderful team at Nimble for that one. It is fantastic to be working with those guys again. Oh, and I've also just done my first presentation to an audience of Agilists. So I'm starting to get a bit of an inkling of just how much I still need to learn and how much I don't even know I know yet. Don't know. With every new role, I'm repeatedly thrown in at the deep end with new problems to solve, and it's a real challenge, and I love it. I've got autonomy, purpose, and I'm still working on that mastery thing. Thank goodness for meetups like this, eh? And Google. Thank you.
Wow, excellent.
Yes, that's brilliant, because just the fact that learning in itself is a complete agile cycle as well. Fantastic.
Now, let me jump in here, Susannah, because we've got a Stack Overflow that's now the Zoom chat. We've got loads of questions. I mean, your presentation kind of answered some of those, which is great. Books, inspiration, I mean, you shared those with us in a very unselfish way. One question comes from Sylvina, which is cute. I like this one. What kind of changes did you implement in the teams when you were an Agile coach?
Oh, good question. So it depends on the team. Like that unhappy families thing, you know, obviously every team is challenged in its own way and needs a different kind of thing. One thing I think I've come across most frequently is the need for teams to focus. So many teams I've worked with now, and this is as a product owner as well, commit to way more than they can possibly deliver, and getting them to truly understand what they're capable of getting out of the door within a particular time frame, and keep reducing the amount that they commit to until they start being able to deliver all of it. The feeling they get when they commit to a certain amount of work for a sprint and they've delivered all of that work by the end of the sprint is enough motivation for you to introduce almost any other change you want to at that point.
No, agreed. I think that's spot on. This is kind of loosely related to that, is how do you give the team the tools and power to resolve their conflicts?
I could almost answer this as the negative, in that you don't do it how I first did it. So the mistake I made was setting up too many one-to-ones and doing that classic thing of ending up being a mediator. Now, sometimes you do need a mediator, but I think what I learned very quickly was that you need to be encouraging those people to be talking to each other. So giving them the confidence to have that conversation, giving them maybe some tools about how they can set boundaries around that conversation if communication's really broken down, and to help them to reach back out to each other rather than relying on you as the go-between.
No, that's super. You know, during the presentation, I had to notice that I was really admiring your earrings, and then I remember I just looked and saw they're the same as mine, except mine are longer with wires on them. So I hope to one day look as good in these as you do. Thank you so much. Laura, back to you.